Alright everybody, get ready and step right up for a fight to the death. In this corner, weighing several tons, with the ability to transform into a car and back into a robot again, and with all these cool robotic powers and gadgets and abilities to crush opponents, is Bumblebee, the amazing, famous, popular, beloved Transformer character who's been delighting fans for decades. And in this corner, we have somebody else named Bumblebee, with the ability to shrink down to small sizes or back to human size. This lady can fire blasts from her hands, and she can fly around like an insect. A really powerful insect, but an insect nonetheless. And she can use a lot of those powers even when she's full size. And she's also got super strength, depending on which version of the character you're reading or watching. But okay, they're not really going to fight to the death or anything. I'm just being silly. This is really a fight between Hasbro, the owner of the Bumblebee character, the Transformer, and DC and Warner Brothers, who own the superhero character of Bumblebee, who shrinks and flies around. Hasbro filed a lawsuit against Warner Brothers and DC because they say that their Bumblebee character, the girl who shrinks around and flies and shoots people, might be confused with their Bumblebee, the giant robot who can also blast people and stuff, but looks totally different. These characters have been coexisting by perfectly fine in their respective universes for several years, but just now, apparently Hasbro has decided enough is enough. This Bumblebee is a threat to our Bumblebee. We got to put an end to it. We're getting some lawyers. And this is the way it is right now. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because, like I said, both Bumblebee characters have been existing just fine for a while. Hasbro specifically wants to block the sale of Bumblebee toys. Bumblebee is one of the characters in DC's DC Superhero Girls cartoon. The character's been in comics for several years, but recently DC and Warner Brothers launched this cartoon in 2015 called DC Superhero Girls, with Bumblebee as one of the main characters. And they partnered with Mattel, the famous company behind Barbie and a lot of other dolls for girls. Mattel and DC partnered to release a DC Superhero Girls doll line to coincide with their show. And their show is actually, I think, pretty popular from what I've heard with its demographic. But meanwhile, Hasbro wants to sell, I guess, a new line of Bumblebee the Robot toys. And they're getting ready to launch the Bumblebee live action movie, I think, in Christmas of 2018. And they feel that the DC Bumblebee dolls will threaten the Hasbro Bumblebee, toys that'll be sold, which will probably be geared mostly for boys. But the point is, there are two Bumblebees and they've got to fight it out. And I'm curious to see what's going to happen. And, on the one side, Bumblebee, DC's Bumblebee, she came out first. She debuted in 1977 in the Teen Titans comics as DC's first African-American superhero. And she has appeared sporadically in comics since then. Even though Bumblebee's been around for decades now, she was never a big character in DC or comics in general. I don't think a lot of people even knew the character existed until she showed up in 2015 in DC Superhero Girls. I think more than 30 years after she debuted. She was in the Teen Titans comics. She was kind of like a minor member. I don't know if she ever really got that many storylines. And then she vanished into obscurity for the most part when DC decided to revamp the Titans comic book from the 70s. When it transitioned to the 80s, they changed writers and they got all these new members and revamped the comic. And some characters were just shunted off into limbo, and one was Bumblebee. They wrote it so that she retired, with her boyfriend. His name was also Mal Duncan, also another Titan with superpowers. I think his name was Harold, and he had some sonic power with his voice. They basically wrote both those characters out of the Titans, and they were sidelined for several years throughout that. They would pop up every now and then for stories, but for the most part, you didn't really hear too much about them. And she came up most recently. DC brought her back in comics with the DC Rebirth to be a member of their Titans team. She popped up before then. She was a member of the Doom Patrol and other things, but None of those other, timelines lasted. With this new timeline, she's back as a member of the Titans, just the Titans now, because they're all supposed to be too old to be teens anymore, these original members. She's a member of that group, and she's back fighting crime with the rest of the old Titans who are now grown up. Not teens anymore, they're, young adults. And she's back. And I think the only reason they did that, though, is because she's now in DC Superhero Girls, and she's sort of kind of enjoying a rise in popularity. And I think DC wanted to capitalize on that by having her pop up in a comic and not have her be in limbo anymore. So thanks to DC Superhero Girls, Bumblebee is enjoying a lot more popularity and exposure than I think she's ever had. I mean, she was around in the 70s, but for a little while, and then you never heard from her again. Not that much. Not that much. On the other side, though, we have the Transformers Bumblebee. This Bumblebee debuted, I think, in 1983 in the cartoon or the toy line. But anyways, it was the early 1980s, about like 5 or 6 years after DC's Bumblebee debuted in 1977. And I think in terms of popularity, the Transformers robot has the superhero Bumblebee, the girl, beaten in spades. Because Bumblebee has been in a popular cartoon and toy line for several decades. Bumblebee is a lot of little kids and adults' most famous Transformer. I mean, Optimus Prime is really popular, but Bumblebee is like, a big kid, and he used to turn into a cute little bug. They changed it later where he turns into more, I guess, tougher kinds of, vehicles and things like that. And he has, a very likable personality. Bumblebee is a pretty huge character, I think, in the Transformers pantheon and in pop culture in general. I mean, he's not like, Mario or like Sonic or Zelda or anything in terms of popularity, but he's pretty up there. More so than DC's Bumblebee, who no one really cared about until 2 years ago. Bumblebee in the Transformers has been an important character since the 80s and still is today. So it'll be tough to see who wins this one. I don't think that no matter what happens, I think when this lawsuit is resolved, I think both characters will still exist and be fine. I mean, at least in terms of stories, movies, TV shows, comics, or whatever, I think DC will still be allowed to have Bumblebee show up in DC Superhero Girls and comics, and I think Bumblebee and Hasbro will still be in movies and animated series and stuff. This whole issue is over toys and whether or not the Bumblebee name or brand will be confused. When people hear the name Bumblebee, are they going to think giant robot, or are they going to think teenage girl who flies around and shoots people? And I think most people are going to think, Transformer robot, but ultimately I don't think they're going to really confuse them because they're both very different. I mean, one's a giant robot made of metal, the other one's a flesh and blood girl who, shrinks this small and flies around and shoots people. I don't know, it's possible there's some confusion, but not much. And the Bumblebee doll is already being sold, and they're already, I think, Bumblebee Transformer toys, and they seem to be doing fine. I mean, both lines seem to be doing fine. And the word Bumblebee, that's a name of a creature that exists in nature anyway. I mean, can anybody trademark that? Hasbro filed a trademark in 2015 for Bumblebee, but I think that trademark only applies to certain things. Like, I don't really know if they can ban people from using a name that's attached to like an insect that flies around that's older than all of us. That's like me trademarking the word tree. I mean, I can trademark it, but it's not like nobody can write the word tree in an essay or anything because I said, that's mine. So I don't know. It'll be curious to see what happens. Who's going to win? Is DC going to be able to make Bumblebee dolls? Or are they going to have to stop because Hasbro thinks that Bumblebee dolls are going to muddle the branding for their Bumblebee, action figures that little boys are going to buy and, fight other Transformers with. It'll be interesting. I think what should happen is the judge should be like, nah, you both can just do it. People won't care. You can have your Hasbro Transformers toys, and DC can have their Bumblebee dolls, and shake hands and get along. We'll see. Hasbro does have an actual Bumblebee trademark. They locked that stuff down. And DC didn't do that. From what I know, DC has not filed a trademark on Bumblebee at all. They just started making the dolls. And we'll see. I'll cover this as it develops. But I think it's very interesting to have two pop culture icons duking it out. Not really. But as an aside, although even if I do think Bumblebee and Hasbro was to fight Bumblebee from DC, I love DC, and I think it's great that Bumblebee is the first African-American superheroine, but I think the robot Bumblebee would whoop her butt because, I don't know, you have a giant, super ton, robot made of all this metal, and then you have a woman who shrinks down to even a smaller woman who's this big who flies around. He'd squash her. Who knows? Maybe she could shrink around so small he couldn't see her, but I don't know. I think robots can detect. They have robot vision. They can see things that are this small because they have better eyes than us. They have systems for that. Or he can send nanobots out. But whatever. I'm being silly. I'm going off to a tangent. But anyhow, that was my quick little video for the day. If you like this video about DC related and Transformer stuff, please subscribe, like, comment, whatever. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.